Hello, I'm Barbara Lee Diamondstein. Welcome to Visions and Images, American Photographers on Photography. Our guest today, Elliott Erwitt, is one of the most talented and versatile photographers of our time. An accomplished photojournalist, a successful commercial photographer, an independent filmmaker, the one-time president of Magnum. He is also an inspired photographer and humorist. And it is for this, which the public would call his serious work, for which he is widely known and widely admired. A warm welcome to you, Elliott Erwitt. You were born in Paris, spent most of your youth in Italy, and came to the United States in the early 1940s. Since the age of 16, when you were a student at Hollywood High School, you've been a professional photographer. How did that all begin?
Well, I took pictures at school events such as senior proms, things of that sort, and that paid a little bit. And then I took pictures outside of people, children, dogs, houses. I guess that's how, and then I made prints for people. That's how I started.
There are three people that are often cited as having played an important part in your early career. Can you tell us a little bit of the role of Erwitt Steichen and Robert Capa and Roy Stryker?
Well, Roy Stryker gave me my first grown-up job when I came to New York, which was working for Standard Oil of New Jersey.
How did you come to meet him?
Let me think. Well, I came to New York and I started making rounds of people who might give jobs, and he was one of the people on my list.
And the other two names that appear so often in reading about you are Erwitt Steichen, who was the then director of the Department of Photography of the Museum of Modern Art. There's one.
Right. Well, he's also on the list. I mean, the list was smaller than it is these days, but there was a list of a half a dozen names, and I just proceeded.
How did a young photographer get to the Museum of Modern Art?
By bus, mostly. I just get off at 53rd Street. Now, actually, people were more accessible in those days. Life was a little simpler, I think. You just went, called first, and said you would like, saying you would like to show some pictures, and you were seen generally.
By the time you were in your early 20s, you had already won a Life magazine prize and had a photo chosen for the Family of Man exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art. Perhaps you can recall for us how that came about.
It was the same time as I was drafted into the Army, 1951. And I took pictures. I had a little camera with me, and I took pictures during basic training of whatever was accessible to me. And I sent in those pictures to this contest and won a second prize.
What was the photo?
It was a story. It was a story about Army life, I guess. It was called Bed and Boredom. And it just described in pictures whatever was accessible to me during basic training.
And it was soon thereafter that you also had a photo appear in the Family of Man exhibition. Did you ever expect the world to celebrate and proclaim that exhibition the way that it did?
Well, Family of Man was kind of a grand idea with a lot of quotes under pictures by poets and that sort of thing. What I object to the exhibit now in retrospect, and I did at the time too, is that there were many bad pictures in it. The pictures were used to illustrate a theme. It was sort of an exercise in illustration. There were many wonderful pictures in the exhibit, and there were many rotten pictures and stupid pictures, I thought, too. But the pictures supported the theme of the exhibit. That's what I found was wrong with it. However, the public liked the exhibit very much, and the theme was important, and it all worked out.
And which of your photographs was included in that?
I had several. I don't remember them all. One I do remember, of course. It was a picture of my first child and her mother at the age of 6 days. That's a picture that's been used a lot by... It became prominent because it was in this exhibit, and then it's been used. It's still being used a lot.
By the time you were 11 years old, you had adopted your third country and your fourth language. In looking through your own photographs, books by and about you, there are self-portraits of yourself. It seems to me that some of them are almost a masquerade, an Afghan hat here, a blonde wig there. What are you really saying about the whole question of personal identity?
Gosh. Nothing, I guess. I think if you take a picture of yourself, you might as well try to be a little amusing about it, or I think most people take themselves a little bit too seriously with pipes in their hands and things like that. So I thought by doing something a little offbeat, it might be more interesting. I have no particular thought in mind.
Very often the gestures of both humans and animals are elements that you seem to focus on and create the humor in a picture. Is that accidental, are you saying? Do you discover it in the contact sheets, or do you frame it while you're taking the picture?
Well, I obviously frame it while I'm taking the pictures. I don't know why the snapshots that I take, this sort of thing. You can't study them, because if you start to study them, they're gone long before you finish studying. So I think it's the pictures that you're referring to, I think, are instinctive pictures. They have nothing to do with figuring out special meanings or special juxtapositions. You just see something, you take a picture of it. And then, of course, you look in your contact sheets, and then you make your discoveries there.
Well, what are the strategies that you use that result the way they do in your work?
Well, let's see, strategy. I do take pictures of dogs, and I bark at them sometimes. I suppose that's strategy. But that's really to attract their attention more than to convey a message to them.
I hear you not only bark at them, sometimes you even duel with them.
Yeah. I have a horn. That's another thing I have. I have a kind of automobile horn that I use sometimes.
Harpo Marx style.
I guess. Well, it depends on the camera. If it's a big camera, it's a big horn. If it's a little camera, it's a little horn. And that's to attract people. You can't take a picture of people's faces if they're turned around. So you blow your horn and they turn towards you and you take their pictures.
Well, many of your anti-photographs show dogs in poses and activities that recall human attitudes. You've been doing a series of dogs now, I guess, over a more than 20-year period on 6 continents. So there is something very special, one assumes, about dogs that interest you in that subject. Could you share with us what that ongoing interest is?
Well, dogs are everywhere except in China. I was in China recently. I didn't see any dogs at all. But dogs are everywhere, and therefore they're available to be photographed, you see. And when you walk around with a camera and you're snapping away, and you see a friendly face of a dog, you take his picture because he's there.
You also have a penchant for photographing underdogs, lowly animals who persist in the face of every kind of adversity. What about such apparently simple themes, what do they mean to you?
What's an underdog?
Very tiny dogs.
That's what I thought. Well, I must tell you, I separate my work in different sections, in several sections. I suppose you're referring to the pictures that I take for my own amusement.
And which for our pleasure as well. You've collected them in a rather well-known book.
Well, those pictures are, I suppose, my real work. The rest is what I do for a living, which is something altogether different. What was your question?
What about dogs, the simple themes? Are you making a larger statement when you photograph dogs, particularly in juxtapositions to humans, both in terms of size, scale, animation?
I really don't know. I guess it's not a very satisfactory answer, but I really don't think about the big picture or what I'm doing, as I mentioned before. I just take pictures and hope that something comes out of it. I don't go into taking these snapshots, and they are snapshots, with any large idea, large cosmic idea or philosophy or something. If something comes out of it, I'm delighted, and but I'll let somebody else decide on that.
Among your best-known photographs is the now classic photograph of the Nixon-Khrushchev kitchen debate that you took in Russia.
I'm not a Nixon fan, so and I wasn't at that time either. I guess now it's fashionable not to be, but that picture was just a nicely composed picture. It was unique because I was the only person there at the moment, and I don't think it reflects anything in particular, just a lucky shot.
Was there a debate going on?
Yeah, I think there was one of those dumb things that politicians do for the public, really. I think they were just, Nixon was saying something to the effect that we eat more meat than you do, and he was saying something, but we're, I don't know, we'll surpass you in 20 years. That kind of bromide was going on. There was no debate. Political debates are not held in Macy's kitchen. Generally, they're held at negotiating tables. I think this was a tour through the Moscow, to the U.S. fair in Moscow. And they just stopped there, and they had a little discussion.
You made reference earlier that, and made a distinction between your personal work and your commercial work. From the very beginning of your career, you seem to have had a very clear vision of what you had to do for money and what you had to do for pleasure. How have you managed to turn your commercial photography into your private gain? Does it interfere? Does it inspire? Does it facilitate? How does that all work?
It seemed to me that commercial photography seemed to be compatible to what I had learned, to what I was interested in, and I was able to do it. I mean, that's how I learned my living. And photography at that point, in the beginning, was my hobby. I took pictures for fun, you know, for my own amusement. As I suppose my career grew, and as photography became more in vogue, not the magazine, some of the personal work took over and became important and became saleable. This is something that I never would have dreamed about 30 years ago when I was doing these pictures.
Well, you've always prided yourself on your versatility. If it was a photograph of a head of state or a food shot, you were both available and interested in doing that. And you once said, and if I may, I'd like to quote it, that you thought that all photographic assignments, bar none, are logical problems that have logical solutions. Aren't there any great secrets in photography, particularly coming from someone such as yourself who is really very knowledgeable about technique?
If you're talking about commercial photography, there are absolutely no secrets, in my view. It is a matter of solving logical problems. In the hobby aspect, I don't know if there are secrets, there are interests, personal interests. I think the only real technique in photography that is something that is not easily learned from reading the instructions in the box of film is a sense of composition and a sense of the subject.
There is the work of a number of artists to which you respond.
Yeah, I have a long list. I mean, certainly in photography, it's a pretty classic list. I have very little interest in fashionable photographers. I have very little interest in people who are interested in color and that, you know, in photography and sort of my hobby aspect of photography. And that narrows it down pretty much. So the old classics, Bill Brandt, Cartier-Bresson, you know, people like that, Cortez, these are the obvious ones. These are the people I respect and am interested in.
Why do you have such little interest in color?
I have little interest in color as far as I'm concerned. I mean, as far as I'm concerned in taking color pictures. Because I cannot manipulate it as I can black and white. Because color, to me, seems always to be pretty, and the prettiness gets in the way of things. And that's a narrow view of things, I realize, but that's my view. I shoot in color almost 95%, I would think, of everything I do.
Is
including
this commercial assignments?
Yeah, commercial or magazine assignments, or I do a lot of editorial work. It's all in color. I really, these days, only my personal stuff is in black and white. And even my movie work is all in color. And of course, in movie, I think color is absolutely appropriate, and because there you're giving information. You're not abstracting information. You're giving information as full as possible, and color is information.
Your photographs, so much depends on that special found moment. I wonder if in your films there is a succession of these special found moments that you search for.
The wonderful thing about documentary filming, and that's what I'm interested in, is that sometimes, when you least expect it, some magical thing happens. That has a parallel to still photographs.
What are those things about which you'd like to make films?
It's always the same thing. The subject doesn't really matter. It's always the same. I hope it's the same in my photographs, my personal photographs. It's always the human condition and nothing else, really, as expressed in whatever way, whether it's through dogs, whether it's through majorettes, whether it's through anything. That's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with people and what they think and what they're like, and the emotional side of people.
Well, you're accustomed to taking a very long view, not only philosophical about it, but you've often seen the results of your patients.
If you do reasonable work, it will have a life beyond the purpose that was, the original purpose that it was designed for. That's why so much of the work that is done looks so old and boring. Pick up a magazine of 10 years ago. You can hardly believe that you were impressed by that stuff. Most of it. Whereas the good pictures of the people that I mentioned before, 30, 40 years later, look better and better and better, in my view. So I think good work has a real life, and work done to fill pages, to fill concepts of editors and books. That one has to do with the fashion of the times, and that one historically might be interesting, but actually is not terribly interesting.
You spend a great deal of your time traveling. I assume when you are on one assignment, you are also taking photographs either for your personal work or another. What was the longest or most telling assignment that you've ever had? Not the one from which you returned yesterday.
No. Let me think. Yes, I did a book for Time Life Books some years ago. I think that was maybe my most interesting assignment, of Iron Curtain countries. And that was interesting because at the time, it was a time to be in Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and all those places. And consequently, I got some nice pictures because I was really working for myself or for my perceptions rather than for some editor's preconceptions.
But it must be something that you're always surrounded by, the preconceptions of an editor, a publisher,
Yes.
a client. Are those constraints very difficult for you to work within?
They're very easy. They're much easier than the limitations that you impose upon yourself. When you said about logic, you know what your clients want. So all you have to do is just get it. When you're looking yourself, you don't know. You want to be surprised. You don't come with preconceptions. You just come with an attitude. And then you can react to the world. The other way, you don't react so much. You come knowing what you're going to get out.
During the course of your presidency at Magnum, you started a campaign, in fact, did wear a little button. What did that say and what was it all about?
Oh, it's one of my little jokes, I guess. I had a button made for all my colleagues to wear if they wished to. It was not mandatory. That had a translation from the Latin, from the English to the Latin, that copyright is sacred. So I thought that whenever we would see an editor and discuss with him an assignment, we would wear this button, which was in Latin, and that he, if he was a visual person, seeing the thing on your lapel, would ask you what it said, what the significance was, and then you would tell him. And that somehow would convey a subtle message to the editor.
Well, something lost in the translation, and originally I think it was mostly you. What happened as a result of your campaign in your relationship with Life magazine?
Well, we won to the extent, I mean, we didn't work there for a very long time, a lot of us, not just me, or some of us worked in a very reduced way, but eventually they saw the right, as everyone else does, that indeed the pictures you take ought to be your pictures. Eventually they should revert to you, and that you're really selling only the use of your pictures, but not the copyright. I think that's pretty much accepted now, except, and quite rightly so, in totally commercial work, advertising and corporate work, and even there's a gray area.
You've often said that you'll always be an amateur photographer. What do you mean when you say that?
Exactly that. An amateur photographer, or an amateur anything, is a person who does it for the love of it, primarily. And my personal photography is done for that reason, and I don't see any reason to change that.
Much has been said about your great gifts as a comedian. And over again, you are likened to Charlie Chaplin and Harpo Marx, and I can understand why. But I wonder if that is the way that you would liken yourself. I mean, do you envision yourself in any of those terms?
That's high praise indeed. I'm not an actor, so if the pictures that I take are amusing and make people amused, and so then to that extent, if that can be compared to actors making people laugh, fine. But I don't draw any other parallel.
I assume you see humor in most circumstances.
Yeah.
In the absurd sense?
Yeah, I enjoy absurd things. I like black humor. Yeah, I have sympathy for those kinds of things.
When one gets off the small elevator to your apartment, a visitor steps out and is greeted by a very huge stuffed head, and it is a moose. I wonder if you can tell us what that tells you or us about the human experience.
Well, I think everyone has to be somewhere. No, let's see. Why do I have that moose there? I think it's a nice decorative piece. It occupies almost the entire hallway. I'm looking for a companion piece.
What did you have in mind?
I think another moose. I like the idea of...
What is two moose? What are two moose?
Meese. I'd like to have people, as they come out of the elevator, perhaps duck to ring the bell. I thought...
That's tunnel vision.
No, I think that might be amusing. I don't know.
There are certain recurring themes to your work. We've talked about dogs, and we haven't talked much about beaches. You seem to be very interested in that locale. What is the constant attraction of the beach to you?
Well, that's another thing. I'm very often in places where there's the sea or the waterfront, and that's a good place to take pictures, I find. Like with dogs, it's in most places.
What do we reveal about ourselves at the beach that you find particularly engaging?
I don't know. I just go there and take pictures, and I hope that if there's anything to be revealed, it'll be in the pictures. But again, I'm working on a book about beaches because it's a theme, and as I mentioned before, it's good to have themes these days.
And what is that one entitled?
Well, the working title is Son of Beach, but I don't know. It's just a working title, excuse me.
Do you carry a camera with you most of the time?
Yeah, I do.
What kind of camera is that? I know one of the things you've done on this most recent journey was to get new equipment. What kind of equipment do you use?
Well, the equipment that I go to Europe to get sometimes is specialized stuff. It's not... The equipment I use to take my snaps is very simple. It's an old Leica that hasn't changed in 25 years. The stuff that I go to Europe to get is sometimes specialized stuff for movies or a new fast lens which isn't available here, or parts for something. Things that aren't available here.
Did you ever expect your life to unfold the way it has?
I don't know that I had any expectations in particular. I don't look forward too far. I just live as it comes.
Thank you for being so generous and sharing your thoughts and your feelings and your ideas with us. I'm Barbara Lee Diamondstein for Visions and Images, American Photographers on Photography.